Hi, my name is Jessica Pearson, and I will be talking to you today about due process rights and a few of the systems used to determine eligibility for special education. Before we begin, I just want to emphasize what I think is really important to remember throughout this presentation, which is the importance of a positive relationship with parents when communicating with them and working with them in an educational setting with their child. Parents are really a valuable part of the team, and our common goal is to serve the best interests of the child, so we need to keep that in mind. A good scripture to remember this is Philippians 2:14, do everything without complaining or arguing, so keeping the atmosphere positive between parents, not adversarial. And also, a gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Proverbs 15:1. Even if a parent is unhappy or confused, we can respond in a gentle manner. And that's really going to be the best way to be productive and to reach our goals. That being said, I would like to define due process within the special ed certification procedures. Really, these due process rights are designed to safeguard the rights of students with disabilities and their parents throughout the process. It provides protection to the families during the entire process, assessment, evaluation, and certification, to be sure that their rights are protected. And this is dictated at a federal level, but really it's important that specific procedures are put in place at state and local levels so that we can consider individual needs and preferred practices within each district and classroom. There is a handbook that parents are provided that outlines their rights. The Procedural Safeguards Handbook is developed by CDE, and that is provided to parents at any time there's an evaluation or a change in program, or really if they request it at all, that needs to be provided to them. And that's available on the CDE website, which I've indicated here, but also I am including a summary handout with my PowerPoint today. During the assessment process, parents have the right to participate in it and any decisions that come from assessments in their child's programming. So they must be notified in writing prior to assessments and meetings, and this must be done in their native language. And they need to give consent for this initial evaluation. So the school needs to show that they've made reasonable efforts to contact the parents. And within the Procedural Safeguards Handbook, it's spelled out what parental consent is. It means that the parents have been fully informed of all the information that they're asking to give consent about, that they understand and agree that the consent describes what's going to be done, and that they also understand that their consent is voluntary. They can revoke it at any time. But if they do revoke it, then there is still a school record of what has been implemented. So further, for parental rights during assessment, they have the right as parents to request additional evaluations or independent evaluations if they don't think that the school has collected enough, or if something is inaccurate, they have the right to request that. And also, parents are entitled to confidentiality throughout the process. We have a responsibility as a school to protect that. Once the assessment process is completed and students are referred to determine if they are eligible for special ed, the person that's making the referral must clearly explain this to parents, including the problem, how long it's been occurring, the types of modifications that have been introduced, and of course explaining the assessment that's been done in a clear way. The parents have the right to access records during this process and to participate in all meetings and decisions. And the IEP team is responsible for explaining a placement that they're recommending. If it requires a removal from the general education classroom, they need to show evidence for that and data to support that need. Again, parents must give their consent for this service to be delivered, and they have the right to revoke that at any time. They are entitled to confidentiality throughout this, and also to be notified of progress toward goals once those are implemented. And usually that happens about the same time as report cards in the general ed curriculum. Finally, if there is an issue during discussion of student placement, the parents have the right to mediation or a due process hearing, and again, that's spelled out in the Procedural Safeguards Handbook. Also, if there are social-emotional issues involved, there are disciplinary guidelines outlined in the handbook as well for students with disabilities, and parents can consult that for what their rights are for discipline within the school system. Now that we've discussed this process for assessment, evaluation, and placement, I'd like to describe 3 systems for determining eligibility within special education: the response to intervention model, progress monitoring, and the Colorado growth model. RTI is the first system which we use here in Colorado, and what it is a multi-tier approach to identifying students and supporting them in either learning or behavior areas, and it uses research-based interventions. So again, there are 3 levels to this intervention, and what's important to remember throughout them all is the essential components, which are high-quality instruction, ongoing assessment, having this tiered instruction so we can address differentiating needs among learners, and parental involvement. So the process begins with Tier 1, which is quality instruction again for all students, screening, and group interventions. What we want to do here is rule out poor instruction as a cause for poor student performance. So we can use standardized and curriculum-based assessments to monitor student performance and progress during the interventions. This tier should not exceed 8 weeks. If at that time students aren't successful, then they will either advance to Tier 2. If they are successful, then they could return to the curriculum with those interventions in place, which is aligning with least restrictive environment. If they proceed to Tier 2, that would be targeted interventions. That's when struggling learners are provided with more intense interventions at increasing levels as needed. This usually happens in small group settings. It's monitored closely for progress or lack thereof. And this tier should not exceed 1 grading period of time. If progress is not made adequately at that time, then the student would proceed to Tier 3, which is intensive interventions and a comprehensive evaluation if that's determined appropriate. So this is one-on-one interventions that really target the specific skill deficits of the student, and they are considered for eligibility if the progress is not adequate during this tier. Again, related to parental rights, at any point in the RTI process, parents are allowed to request a formal evaluation. It's not that we would say, well, we need 3 more weeks of this before we can do an evaluation. If the parents request that, is their right to do that. And again, throughout the process of RTI and any evaluation or assessment, ongoing communication with the parents, just good practice to keep them informed. Progress monitoring is the second system that's used to determine student eligibility. This is a scientifically based practice that's used to assess performance and evaluate the effectiveness of instruction. And this is used within RTI to monitor that performance and progress, and then we can take that data and use it to determine if the student is eligible. So within the RTI model, progress monitoring is the method that we use to determine if the students are benefiting from the typical instruction in the classroom. If they're not, then we identify those students who aren't making progress, and we can help design effective intervention programs for them and individualize their learning. So the way progress monitoring works is first you determine the student's current level of performance, then you identify the learning goals and needs, and the process of monitoring that is really important, that we measure that on a regular basis. So what we're comparing is what we expect the students to learn and their actual rates of learning. And we document that ideally weekly or bi-weekly using formal and informal assessments. And again, we need to document that in writing. And I have attached also with my presentation a sample worksheet that really outlines what's the intervention that's done and provides a place for the educator to write down their scores and keep track of that so that can be presented to the team. Fourthly, we would adjust instructional techniques to meet the individual learning needs based on what the progress monitoring is showing us. If the student is not having success, then we would make a change to better suit their needs. In order for progress monitoring to be effective, must be available in alternate forms, so not giving the same test repeatedly, but that it's comparable in difficulty and concepts. It should represent the performance that we desire at the end of the year to keep the student moving forward to that goal. And also the professional monitoring the progress must be trained in how to do that, so it's consistent and useful data. The last system for student eligibility is the Colorado Growth Model. This is a statistical model that's used to calculate progress of state assessments. So we use this tool to display results of students, schools, and districts to educators and the public. And basically what it tells us is how the individual students progress from year to year on the state standards. So we're looking at a norm referenced measure here. And then we look at the growth between different groups, and that will help us determine whether the student is on track to catch up or keep up, which we call adequate growth. In order to use the results from the Colorado Growth Model, we do use them to align the curriculum, to set goals, to involve parents, to decide what professional development needs the teachers have, the learning needs of the students, and to plan interventions for students who aren't making that adequate growth. It gives us the data we need to begin doing that. The growth model answers questions that parents might have, like, did my child make a year's worth of progress in a year? Is my child growing appropriately toward the standards? Did they grow as much in math as in reading? Did my child grow as much last year as this year? And did my child grow as much as his peers? These are very relevant questions for parents, and this model can address those. Teachers will have similar questions. It also will indicate to them how close their students are to becoming proficient, and if there are students with unusually low growth, they can determine that those students need special attention. So in order to use this for eligibility, we're looking at discrepancies that students have from their grade level peers. It gives us a clearer picture of their ability and their progress. And we can also use it to measure the effectiveness of interventions over time, how students are performing on these standardized tests. And because they are norm referenced, they're more likely to be valid and reliable forms of measurement. I hope this information has been helpful for you in terms of understanding the importance of involving parents and informing them of their rights throughout this process, and also the models that we've discussed for eligibility. It's really important that as educators we're knowledgeable about this and we are able to address the needs of all students effectively, professionally. We have to have a lot of tools in our arsenal, so we need a lot of methods and styles of intervention so that we can individualize that for each child. So I just would encourage you again to keep in mind that parents are a valuable part of this process, that we are all working together toward the same goal, and to keep it positive and encouraging, and to remember our aim as educators to train a child in the way he should go, and when he is old he will not turn from it. That's an important charge for us, and I hope this information has been helpful for you in following that goal. Thank you.